The Galactic Council had faced many crises in its 10,000-year history, but none quite like this. Ambassador Zethkar of the Valorian Empire stood before the massive holographic display showing the energy readings from Kepler 442b, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. The numbers couldn't be right. They simply couldn't be. "Run the scan again," he commanded, his translator converting his chittering clicks into standard galactic speech. The technician, a small gray being from Proxima Station, nervously adjusted the controls. "Sir, we've run it 17 times. The readings are consistent. The power output from the human settlement on Kepler 442b is..." The technician paused, checking his instruments once more. "Approximately 47,000 times greater than their projected needs." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in frustration. When the Council had first encountered humanity 3 years ago, they had been impressed by the species' ingenuity and determination. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel independently, something only 12 species in the known galaxy had accomplished without outside assistance. The Council had welcomed them as junior members, expecting them to gradually learn galactic technologies over the next few centuries. The current crisis had begun 6 months ago, when the Zarathi Collective's home system started experiencing catastrophic solar instabilities. Their star was dying prematurely, throwing their entire civilization into chaos. Billions of lives hung in the balance as their homeworld's temperature dropped and their industrial capacity failed. The Zarathi were an ancient and proud species, known throughout the galaxy for their mastery of quantum mechanics and dimensional physics. They had requested emergency assistance from the Galactic Council. The solution seemed straightforward enough. The Zarathi needed massive amounts of energy to power planetary heating arrays and maintain their society until they could evacuate their core worlds. The Council had calculated that it would require the combined power output of at least 50 major worlds to meet their needs. Even then, it would strain the galaxy's energy infrastructure to its limits. That's when Councillor Thresh of the Andorian Republic had made an unexpected suggestion. What about the humans? Their preliminary energy assessments showed some interesting approaches to power generation. Most of the Council had dismissed the idea. Humans were newcomers, barely past their first century of space travel. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Sure, they had some clever fusion reactors and were experimenting with antimatter, but nothing that could contribute meaningfully to a crisis of this magnitude. Zethkar had been one of the few to support giving humanity a chance, not because he believed they could solve the problem, but because it would demonstrate the Council's commitment to including all member species in important decisions. It was a political gesture, nothing more. The humans had been given a single world, Kepler 442b, and asked to establish whatever power generation facilities they could manage. The planet was barely suitable for colonization, with harsh weather patterns and limited resources. The Council's projections suggested that humans might be able to generate enough power for a small city, perhaps contributing 1/10,000th of what was needed for the Zarathi rescue operation. Now, staring at the impossible readings on his display, Zethkar wondered if their instruments had been sabotaged. Could there be interference from natural phenomena? He asked. Solar flares? Gravitational anomalies? The technician shook his head. No, sir. We've accounted for all known sources of interference. The energy signature is definitely artificial, and it's definitely coming from the human settlement. Zethkar's personal communicator chimed. The message was from Admiral Chen Wei, the human leader of the Kepler 442b project. Ambassador Zethkar, this is Admiral Chen. We've completed the initial phase of our power generation project. We'd like to schedule a demonstration for the Council representatives. When would be convenient for you? The ambassador stared at the message for a long moment. A demonstration. The humans wanted to show off their little fusion reactor or whatever primitive technology they had cobbled together. They probably had no idea that their energy output was reading higher than some star systems. "Send a reply," Zethkar instructed his aide. "Tell the Admiral we'll arrive within 48 hours, and contact the other Council representatives. If these readings are accurate, they need to see this." The next day, Zethkar found himself aboard a Council transport ship approaching Kepler 442b, accompanied by representatives from 6 major galactic powers. Through the viewports, the planet looked much as it had during the initial survey, a brown and gray world with swirling storm systems and minimal vegetation. "Approaching human settlement," reported the pilot. "Wait. I'm detecting multiple artificial structures. This doesn't match our initial survey data." Zethkar moved to the forward viewport and felt his breath catch in his throat. Where there had once been empty plains, massive structures now dotted the landscape. Enormous towers stretched toward the sky, connected by what appeared to be a vast network of cables and pipelines. Strange geometric shapes that defied easy classification were scattered across hundreds of square kilometers. "How long did you say they've been here?" asked Councillor Vesh of the Trinarid Coalition. 6 months, Zethkar replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The transport ship touched down at what appeared to be a hastily constructed landing pad. Admiral Chen Wei was waiting for them, along with a small group of humans in matching blue uniforms. The Admiral was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and calm, confident eyes. "Welcome to New Pittsburgh," she said, gesturing to the sprawling complex behind her. "Thank you for coming to see our work." Zethkar couldn't help but stare at the structures in the distance. "Admiral, our sensors are detecting enormous energy outputs from your facility. Are you certain your equipment is functioning properly?" Admiral Chen smiled. "Oh, it's functioning perfectly. Better than we expected, actually. Would you like the tour?" The group followed the Admiral toward the nearest complex, their footsteps echoing on metal walkways. As they walked, Chen explained what they were seeing. "When we arrived, we realized that conventional fusion wouldn't be sufficient for the scale of the problem. So we had to think differently. The first breakthrough came when Dr. Patel's team figured out how to create stable micro-black holes, using the planet's gravitational field as a focusing mechanism." Councillor Vesh stopped walking. "I'm sorry, did you say micro-black holes?" "That's right. We're using them as gravitational batteries. The black holes consume matter we feed them and release energy through Hawking radiation, which we capture and convert to usable power. It's actually quite elegant." Zethkar's 4 eyes were now fixed on the Admiral. "Creating artificial black holes is considered impossible by most of our top physicists." Chen shrugged. "Well, impossible is a strong word. Difficult, certainly. We lost 3 research teams before we got the containment fields right. But once we solved the basic problems, scaling up was relatively straightforward." They reached the first major structure, a tower that stretched nearly 2 kilometers into the sky. Strange lights pulsed along its length, and the air around it seemed to shimmer with heat distortion. "This is Tower 1, Chen explained. "It houses 57 micro-black holes, each about the size of a proton, but with the mass of a small moon. The power output from this single tower is equivalent to about 600 fusion reactors." "How many towers do you have?" whispered Councillor Thresh. Admiral Chen paused to consult a tablet. "As of this morning, we have 47 towers operational, with another 33 under construction. But the towers are just the beginning. Follow me." They continued walking, passing structures that became increasingly bizarre and incomprehensible. One building seemed to be folding in on itself in ways that hurt to look at directly. Another was surrounded by a field of floating metallic spheres that moved in complex, hypnotic patterns. "That's our dimensional tap facility," Chen said, noticing their stares. "We discovered that this planet sits at the intersection of several dimensional membranes, By carefully puncturing the barriers between dimensions, we can harvest energy from parallel realities. It's a bit tricky because you have to be careful not to let anything nasty slip through, but the energy yield is extraordinary. Zethkar felt dizzy. You're harvesting energy from other dimensions? Only uninhabited ones, Chen assured him. We're not monsters. Dr. Rodriguez insisted on that point. Her ethical guidelines are very strict. They passed a complex of low buildings that hummed with barely contained power. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with a deep, rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate in their bones. Antimatter production facility, Chen explained casually. We're using the planet's magnetic field to accelerate particles to near light speed, then smashing them together in controlled collisions. The antimatter yield has exceeded all our projections. Counselor Vesh had stopped taking notes. His writing implement hung limply in his hand as he stared at the humans in disbelief. How is any of this possible? Your species has barely discovered faster-than-light travel. Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. You know, that's something we've been discussing among ourselves. I think the difference is that we're not limited by assumptions about what's impossible. When you've been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years, you probably develop certain ideas about the natural limits of technology. She gestured toward a group of humans working on what appeared to be a massive mechanical flower that was slowly opening and closing. Humans have only been spacefaring for a century. We haven't learned yet what we're not supposed to be able to do. The tour continued for 3 hours. They saw fusion reactors that somehow achieved efficiency ratings of over 300% by tapping into quantum fluctuations in space-time. They witnessed machines that appeared to be converting pure mathematics into electrical energy. They observed engineers who had learned to domesticate small stars, keeping them in magnetic bottles the size of warehouses. The beautiful thing, Admiral Chen explained as they walked past a facility where humans seemed to be having philosophical debates with their equipment, is that everything builds on everything else. The micro-black holes provide power for the dimensional taps, which give us energy to run the antimatter production, which feeds the quantum cascade reactors, which power the stellar containment fields. This is madness, whispered Counselor Thresh. Magnificent madness, but madness nonetheless. Admiral Chen stopped and turned to face the group. Her expression became serious. Counselors, we understand your shock. But we want you to know that this isn't some reckless experiment. Every system has multiple redundancies and safety protocols. We've been running continuous simulations and stress tests. She paused, looking out over the sprawling complex. More importantly, we believe this is just the beginning. Our projections suggest we can increase power output by at least another order of magnitude over the next 3 months. Zethkar felt his legs go weak. Another order of magnitude? Dr. Kim thinks we can do better than that if her experiments with temporal energy loops pan out, but we're trying to be conservative in our estimates. The group stood in silence for several minutes, watching human engineers move about their impossible machines with casual confidence. Finally, Counselor Vesh found his voice. Admiral Chen, do you understand what you've accomplished here? The energy you're producing could power the entire Zarathi evacuation, plus provide emergency power for a dozen other civilizations. Admiral Chen nodded. We calculated that we could meet the Zarathi's needs about 3 weeks ago. Everything since then has been for the sake of having a safety margin. She smiled, and for the first time there was a hint of pride in her expression. But you know what's really exciting? We're pretty sure we can teach other species to build these systems. Humans are good at solving problems, but we're even better at sharing solutions. As the council representatives prepared to return to their ship, each was lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. The galaxy was about to change in ways none of them could have imagined. The age of energy scarcity, it seemed, was about to end. 3 weeks after the council's visit to Kepler 442b, the Zarathi homeworld was no longer dying. The massive energy transmission arrays that humans had constructed in orbit around their planet were beaming incredible amounts of power directly to the Zarathi's failing infrastructure. The entire galactic community watched in amazement as a civilization on the brink of extinction was not just saved, but revitalized beyond their wildest dreams. Emperor Kos of the Zarathi Collective stood in his palace's highest tower, looking up at the artificial aurora that now danced permanently across their sky. The energy beams were so powerful that they created spectacular light shows as they interacted with the planet's atmosphere. His people, who had been preparing for the end of their civilization just months ago, were now celebrating in the streets. "Your Majesty," his chief advisor approached carefully, "the energy readings are difficult to believe. The humans are providing us with more power than our entire star produced at its peak." Kos nodded slowly. "I have read the reports. What troubles me is not their generosity, but their capability. How does a species barely past their first century in space accomplish such things?" The question was being asked throughout the galaxy. In the great libraries of the academic collective, scholars pored over human technical documents that read more like science fiction than engineering specifications. The Mechanicus Empire's greatest engineers had declared human power generation methods theoretically impossible, even as they watched the energy readings with their own instruments. On the moon of Titan in humanity's home system, Dr. Sarah Kim was having similar thoughts as she reviewed the latest reports from Kepler 442b. Her temporal energy loop experiments had succeeded beyond all projections, and the humans there were now generating enough power to supply energy needs for half the galaxy's civilizations. "Dr. Kim," her research assistant interrupted her thoughts, "we're receiving priority communications from dozens of species. They all want to know the same thing." "Let me guess," Dr. Kim said without looking up from her calculations. "They want to know how we're doing it." "That, and they want to know if we can do it for them too." Dr. Kim finally looked up, rubbing her tired eyes. The last month had been a whirlwind of breakthrough discoveries. What had started as an attempt to help the Zarathi had somehow evolved into humanity, reshaping the fundamental understanding of energy generation across the galaxy. "Tell them we're working on standardized plans they can implement. But Sarah," she turned to her assistant, "make sure they understand that our methods require a very specific mindset." The assistant looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" Dr. Kim gestured toward the holographic display showing the Kepler 442b facility. "Look at what we've built. Micro-black holes, dimensional taps, temporal loops, domesticated stars. By all conventional understanding, these things should be impossible. But we built them anyway." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth's blue skies. "The difference isn't our technology. It's that we refuse to accept impossible as an answer. When the Galactic Council told us the Zarathi needed more power than 50 worlds could provide, they saw an impossible problem. We saw an interesting challenge." The communication panel in her lab lit up with an incoming priority signal. The face that appeared was instantly recognizable throughout the galaxy. Chancellor Mordar of the Hegemony Worlds, one of the most powerful leaders in galactic politics. "Dr. Kim," his deep voice resonated through her lab, "I hope you'll forgive the direct contact, but these are extraordinary circumstances." "Of course, Chancellor. How can I help you?" "My science advisors tell me that your species has achieved energy generation capabilities that exceed our theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude. They also tell me this should be impossible." Dr. Kim smiled. "With respect, Chancellor, your theoretical maximums were based on what your species believed could be done. We've simply been exploring what might be possible instead." Chancellor Mordar was silent for a moment. "Dr. Kim, I need you to understand something. The hegemony has been dealing with energy shortages for decades. Our expansion has outpaced our ability to generate sufficient power for our colonies. If your methods could be adapted to our needs— They can be, Dr. Kim interrupted. But Chancellor, I want to be clear about something. These aren't just technical solutions we can hand over. They require a fundamental shift in how you think about problems. Over the next several days, delegations from across the galaxy arrived at human space stations and colonies. The crystalline minds of Regulus sent their most brilliant mathematicians. The Hive Collective dispatched their finest engineers. Even the enigmatic Watchers, who rarely interacted with other species, sent representatives. Admiral Chen Wei found herself hosting what had become the most important scientific conference in galactic history aboard the orbital station above Kepler 442b. Representatives from 43 different civilizations crowded into the station's main conference room, eager to understand humanity's impossible achievements. Before we begin, Admiral Chen announced, I want to address the question that's on everyone's mind. You want to know our secret. You want to understand how we've accomplished things your species considers impossible. A collective murmur went through the assembled delegates. These were some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy, individuals whose species had mastered technologies that humans could barely comprehend. The answer is going to disappoint you, Chen continued. We don't have any special knowledge. We don't have access to technologies you've never seen. What we have is a different relationship with the concept of impossibility. Delegate Zeroth of the Academic Collective raised a crystalline appendage. Admiral, surely you must understand that there are fundamental physical laws that govern energy generation. These laws place absolute limits on what can be achieved. Admiral Chen nodded. You're absolutely right, Delegate Zeroth. Physical laws are absolute, but our understanding of those laws is not. She activated a holographic display showing the progression of human energy generation over the past century. 150 years ago, humans thought that flying was impossible. 70 years later, we thought faster-than-light travel was impossible. 50 years after that, we thought antimatter containment was impossible. The display showed images of human aircraft, spacecraft, and finally the antimatter facilities on Kepler 442b. Each time we encountered something impossible, we had a choice. We could accept that limitation, or we could ask a different question. Instead of asking, why can't this be done? We started asking, how might this be done? Scientist Vorth of the Mechanicus Empire interjected, but Admiral, your micro-black hole technology violates established principles of gravitational mechanics. Admiral Chen smiled. Does it? Or does it violate your established understanding of gravitational mechanics? She gestured to Dr. Elena Vasquez, who stepped forward to address the group. When we first attempted to create micro-black holes, Dr. Vasquez began, our calculations said it was impossible. The energy requirements were too high, the containment fields would fail, the Hawking radiation would be uncontrollable. She paused, looking around the room at faces that represented thousands of years of accumulated scientific knowledge. But then my colleague, Dr. Patel, asked a different question. Instead of asking how to create stable black holes, she asked how black holes create themselves. She studied the natural formation process and found ways to assist it rather than force it. The hologram shifted to show the elegant dance of forces that humans had learned to orchestrate on Kepler 442b. We discovered that the universe wants to create these things. Our job isn't to impose our will on physics, but to work with the underlying patterns that already exist. Representative Clax of the Binary Systems Alliance spoke up, his electronic voice carrying a note of skepticism. This sounds like philosophy rather than science. Dr. Vasquez nodded. In a way it is, but that's exactly the point. Your species have developed incredibly sophisticated technologies by mastering specific scientific disciplines. You've become experts at working within established frameworks. She gestured toward the window, where Kepler 442b's impossible facilities could be seen glowing against the planet's surface. Humans never had the luxury of working within established frameworks. We've only been aware of galactic science for 3 years. We didn't know what was supposed to be impossible, so we didn't limit ourselves to what was supposed to be possible. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. These alien civilizations had spent millennia perfecting their understanding of the universe, creating elegant and sophisticated technologies within carefully defined parameters. But those same parameters had become barriers to breakthrough innovation. Commander Zethkar, who had been quietly observing the discussion, finally spoke. "You're suggesting that our expertise has become a limitation." Admiral Chen nodded. "Not a limitation of capability, but a limitation of imagination. You know so much about what works that you've stopped exploring what might work." She activated another display showing the collaborative projects that were already beginning across human space. But here's the beautiful thing. This isn't a human monopoly. We're not the only species capable of this kind of thinking. We're just the only ones who haven't learned to stop yet. The display showed mixed human-alien teams working on increasingly ambitious projects. Crystalline minds were teaching humans new mathematical frameworks while learning human approaches to creative problem-solving. Mechanicus engineers were discovering that their precision manufacturing could enable human designs that had previously been impossible to build. Over the past month, Admiral Chen continued, we've established joint research initiatives with 6 different species. The results have been extraordinary. The hologram showed a new facility under construction in the Rigel system, where human creativity was being combined with hegemony industrial capacity. Early projections suggested power generation capabilities that exceeded even the Kepler 442b installations. The crystalline minds taught us mathematical techniques that let us model 11-dimensional energy flows. In return, we showed them how to question the assumptions underlying their equations. Together, we've designed power generation systems that neither of our species could have conceived independently. Scientist Vorth leaned forward. "What kind of power generation systems?" Dr. Kim's voice came through the communication system from her lab on Titan. "We've learned to tap into the energy that powers universal expansion itself. Instead of fighting entropy, we've found ways to partner with it." The silence that followed was profound. Even by the standards of what they had already witnessed, this was beyond anything the assembled representatives had thought possible. "The preliminary tests suggest we can generate energy by creating small pockets of accelerated cosmic expansion," Dr. Kim continued. "It's clean, renewable, and the energy yield is limited only by how much space-time we're willing to allocate to the process." Chancellor Mordar finally found his voice. "Dr. Kim, you're describing the ability to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. We prefer to think of it as learning to work with reality's existing flexibility," came the reply. "The universe is far more cooperative than we initially assumed." As the conference continued, it became clear that humanity wasn't just solving the galaxy's energy problems. They were fundamentally changing how galactic civilization approached the concept of technological limitations. Species that had considered their scientific understanding complete were discovering entirely new fields of inquiry. But perhaps more importantly, they were learning that the most powerful technology wasn't any specific device or technique. It was the willingness to believe that impossible problems might simply be unsolved puzzles waiting for the right perspective. The galaxy was about to enter an age of exploration and discovery unlike anything in its recorded history. And it was all because one young species had never learned to stop asking, "What if?" 1 year after the first energy transmission to the Zarathi homeworld, the galaxy had become a place that would have been unrecognizable to the beings who had lived in it just months before. Where there had once been energy scarcity and careful rationing of power resources, there was now abundance that bordered on the magical. Where civilizations had once planned their expansions around the limitations of available energy, They now faced the unprecedented challenge of having more power than they knew how to use. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Energy Coordination Center, a massive station positioned at the gravitational center of the local galactic cluster. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see energy transmission arrays that stretched across light years, carrying power to hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The view was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Dr. Kim. A familiar voice called behind her. She turned to see Ambassador Zethkar approaching, though he looked very different from the formal diplomat she had first met. His ceremonial robes had been replaced by the practical work attire of an engineer, and his 4 eyes carried the satisfied exhaustion of someone who had been solving fascinating problems. "Ambassador," she replied warmly, "though I suppose it's Chief Engineer Zethkar now, isn't it?" He clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was the Valorian equivalent of laughter. "The bureaucratic life lost its appeal once I started working with human engineering teams. Who knew that building impossible things could be so addictive?" It was a transformation that had been repeated across the galaxy. Diplomats had become researchers, administrators had become inventors, and entire civilizations had redirected their focus from managing scarcity to exploring abundance. "The hegemony delegation is arriving soon," Zethkar continued. "They're bringing reports from the Universal Expansion Energy Project. Apparently, they've exceeded even their revised projections." Dr. Kim nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "Zethkar, can I ask you something? Do you ever worry that we're moving too fast?" The question seemed to surprise him. "What do you mean?" "A year ago, the biggest engineering project in the galaxy was the Zarathi rescue operation. Now we're manipulating the fundamental forces of cosmic expansion. We've gone from energy scarcity to energy abundance so vast that we're having to invent new physics just to contain it." She gestured toward the incredible vista outside the window. "Look at what we've built. Stellar foundries that create custom stars for specific energy needs, dimensional engines that draw power from parallel universes, temporal generators that harvest energy from the flow of time itself." "And this concerns you?" Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment. "It concerns me that we might be losing sight of why we started doing this. We wanted to help the Zarathi. Now we're reshaping the fundamental nature of galactic civilization." Before Zethkar could respond, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chancellor Mordar and a delegation of beings that represented nearly every major civilization in the galaxy. The Chancellor looked remarkably different from the formal political figure he had been a year ago. His bearing was more relaxed, his expression more curious than commanding. "Dr. Kim, Chief Engineer Zethkar," he greeted them. "I hope you're prepared for some remarkable news." The group moved to the center's main briefing amphitheater, where holographic displays showed the current state of energy production and distribution across the galaxy. The numbers were staggering. Power output had increased by a factor of 10,000 over pre-human levels and was continuing to grow exponentially. "The Universal Expansion Energy Project has achieved full operational status," Chancellor Mordar announced. "We are now drawing energy directly from the expansion of space-time itself, with power yields that exceed our ability to measure accurately." Representative Zeroth of the Academic Collective added, "Our preliminary calculations suggest that we now have access to more energy than our entire civilization could use if we tripled our current consumption levels for the next 1,000,000 years." Dr. Kim felt a familiar mixture of pride and unease. "That's extraordinary." "But, Chancellor, what are we planning to do with all this energy?" The question seemed to catch the assembled delegates off guard. They looked at each other uncertainly before Chancellor Mordar responded. "Well, we're expanding our colonies, of course, and supporting research into new technologies. The crystalline minds are using their energy allocation to model the quantum structure of consciousness. The Mechanicus Empire is building self-replicating factory worlds. The possibilities are endless. That's exactly what worries me, Dr. Kim said quietly. Chief Engineer Zethkar stepped forward. Dr. Kim, I think I understand your concern. You're wondering whether we've lost sight of our values in our rush to exploit these new capabilities. Something like that. Yes. Admiral Chen Wei's voice came through the communication system from her current position aboard the newest generation of energy platforms. Dr. Kim raises an important point. We need to remember that power, even unlimited power, is just a tool. The question isn't what we can do with it, but what we should do with it. The holographic display shifted to show a new project that had been developing quietly over the past several months. Unlike the massive industrial complexes and cosmic engineering projects they had become accustomed to seeing, this showed something much more modest. Small installations scattered across hundreds of worlds. This is Project Haven, Admiral Chen continued. While we've been focused on generating ever greater amounts of energy, some of our teams have been asking different questions. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared in the amphitheater via hologram, speaking from her research station in the Andromeda approach. Instead of asking how much power we can generate, we started asking how little power we need to solve specific problems. The display showed detailed views of the Haven installations, elegant, compact facilities that seemed to blend seamlessly with their planetary environments. We discovered that with our current energy generation capabilities, we could eliminate scarcity of any kind throughout the galaxy using less than 1% of our current power output, Dr. Vasquez explained. The implications of her statement settled over the assembled delegates like a physical weight. Every being in the galaxy could have access to unlimited clean water, abundant food, comfortable shelter, advanced medical care, and comprehensive education using just a tiny fraction of the energy we're producing, she continued. Chancellor Mordar leaned back in his seat. You're suggesting we could end poverty and want throughout galactic civilization. We're suggesting we already have, Dr. Vasquez replied. The question is whether we want to. The silence that followed was profound. These were civilizations that had structured their entire societies around the management of scarcity, the allocation of limited resources, the difficult choices that came with having less than what was needed. Representative Clax of the Binary Systems Alliance spoke first. Dr. Vasquez, you're describing the end of economics as we understand it. If everyone has access to unlimited resources, what happens to trade, to markets, to the systems that govern our societies? That's exactly the question we need to answer, Dr. Kim said, finally finding her voice again. We've solved the technical challenges of energy generation. Now we have to solve the social challenges of energy abundance. She stood and walked to the center of the amphitheater. A year ago, we were asked to help save the Zarathi. We did that. But we did more than save them. We gave them access to more energy than their entire star had ever produced. The display showed the current state of the Zarathi homeworld. Where there had once been a dying civilization, there was now a vibrant world that had become a center of art and learning. The Zarathi, freed from the struggle for survival, had redirected their efforts toward philosophy, creativity, and the exploration of consciousness itself. The Zarathi didn't use their new energy abundance to build bigger factories or conquer more territory, Dr. Kim continued. They used it to become the beings they had always wanted to be, but never had the luxury to become. Chief Engineer Zethkar nodded slowly. And that's what's happening throughout the galaxy, isn't it? Species are discovering what they're actually capable of when survival isn't their primary concern. Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of wonder. The crystalline minds have started composing mathematical symphonies that exist in 11 dimensions. The hegemony worlds have begun transforming entire star systems into works of art. The Watchers are finally sharing their accumulated knowledge because they no longer need to hoard resources. Dr. Kim smiled, and for the first time in months, her expression carried more hope than concern. So perhaps the question isn't what we should do with unlimited energy. Perhaps the question is what kind of civilization we want to become now that we have the freedom to choose. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing a composite image of the galaxy as it existed now. Streams of energy connected thousands of worlds, carrying not just power, but information, art, music, and ideas. Civilizations that had been isolated by the practical necessities of resource management were now engaged in collaborations that would have been unthinkable just a year before. The galaxy is becoming something new, Dr. Kim observed. Not just technologically, but culturally, socially, philosophically. We're not just sharing energy anymore. We're sharing possibilities. Chancellor Mordar stood and moved to join her at the center of the amphitheater. Dr. Kim, when the Council first encountered humanity, we saw you as a promising young species that might contribute to galactic civilization. We had no idea you would transform it. Dr. Kim shook her head. Chancellor, we didn't transform anything. We just refused to accept that transformation was impossible. She gestured toward the incredible vista visible through the amphitheater's windows. The energy networks, the impossible engineering projects, the collaborations between species that had never been able to work together before. Every species in this galaxy had the capability to do what we've done. The difference was that you had learned what was supposed to be impossible. We never had. Representative Zeroth raised a crystalline appendage. Are you suggesting that the key to breakthrough innovation is ignorance? Not ignorance, Dr. Kim replied. Innocence. The willingness to approach problems without preconceptions about what the solutions should look like. Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of amusement. Though I have to admit, it helps when you're too stubborn to give up just because something seems impossible. As the conference continued, the focus gradually shifted from the technical details of energy generation to the broader implications of abundance. How should civilizations organize themselves when scarcity was no longer a concern? What new forms of art and expression might emerge when beings were freed from the struggle for survival? What questions could they explore when they no longer had to worry about having enough power to explore them? These were not problems that could be solved with engineering or physics. They were challenges that required wisdom, creativity, and the kind of collaborative thinking that was just beginning to emerge across the galaxy. But as Dr. Kim looked around the amphitheater at representatives from dozens of civilizations working together to address these challenges, she realized that perhaps they had already solved the most important problem of all. They had learned that impossible problems were often just unopened possibilities waiting for the right perspective. And once you learned that lesson, there was no limit to what you could accomplish. The galaxy had indeed been transformed, not by unlimited energy, but by unlimited imagination. And that, Dr. Kim reflected, was a power that could never be depleted.